And I'm going to be live streaming this to YouTube in a private stream, so it's not accessible to the public right now. It's just one more backup archive for us. Um, there we go. And all right, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to our workshop today. We're going to be joined today by Misha Sulpovar, who is the Vice President of Artificial Intelligence Products at a company called Cherre that you may or may not be familiar with. Misha has been working at the forefront of AI for about the last decade or more, with everyone from ADP to IBM, and most recently with Cherre. And we had a really good conversation about some of the work that he was doing with his teams, with the larger team at Cherre, to help them get their head around some of the core concepts and productive use of great prompt engineering in this kind of newly accessible world of generative AI that is more accessible to all of us, and thought this would be a great time to put together a workshop to help product management professionals upskill in this area, build out what you are capable of doing, and head down an evolved path. So with that said, I'm going to turn the controls over to my friend Misha, who will take it away from here. Misha, welcome to Product Coffee.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks everybody genuinely for being here, spending the time to come hang out. I know your time is valuable, and I sincerely hope I can make the most of it for you. So today, there's a poll up, by the way, please feel free. I just wanted to get a sense of where folks are at, but we'll keep things agile. We're planning on, I'm going to cover some topics, some content with you guys, and then we're going to do some interactive stuff. My hope is for y'all to really get the most out of these models. It really helps to to get hands-on and practical with it. Now, most of the time, folks I talk to, the experience they've had with these models is coming in, asking a couple of questions from ChatGPT once in a while, maybe generating an email. And so we're definitely going to be moving beyond that. But let's keep this interactive. Please stop and ask questions as we go along, and we'll just get into it because there's a ton of fun stuff to cover. Do you guys see my slide deck? Perfect. Okay. So prompt engineering for product managers. Well, again, we'll go through the state of AI and how LLM works. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because we don't need to know all of the nitty gritty pieces, but it really is helpful to understand what's underlying the technology, because that's going to help frame how we engage the technology. The reason that's important is it's moving so quickly right now that right now we've got a couple of chatbots, more than a couple of chatbots, right? But very soon we're starting to see a lot of things pop up in pretty much every system we're using, whether it's Gmail or whether it's VS Code or any number of things that have prompt interfaces. And so the fundamentals underneath are always going to be driven by how these large language models work, and it really helps to understand those fundamentals. So we'll go through that really quick. We'll go through some best practices, and again, we'll move through that really quick because it's going to be something you're going to use throughout the day, and I'll illustrate that through a couple of really concrete examples. The first is going to be a math example, and I'll explain why. Because math has a right and wrong answer, and we can use that to illustrate why prompts matter. And then we'll also go through a chatbot example very, very quickly. Again, just to get the fundamentals down. We'll talk about keeping prompts organized, and then we'll talk about chaining and sort of that kind of the basics on chaining and tokens and that kind of thing. Then we'll get into the hands-on bit. For us, it's going to be a lot of application frameworks, agent and role building, artifact production, and then going through the product management process with large language models in assistance or in tow. So let's get into it. Again, thanks, Jason, for the intro. I appreciate it. I've been doing either product or AI data science team building for the good part of the last 10, 15 years. My focus has always been pragmatic and applied AI. Today we're going to focus specifically on how to engage these models, but I love talking about how to actually embed AI into our products, which is not the topic of today, but something I'm always happy to geek out about. At Cherre, I've been with Cherre for the last 2 years, and Cherre is all about data aggregation and translating data into insights. And so this space is an extremely hot space for us, and being able to empower our clients, which are all in the real estate space at Cherre. And so that's a bit of context there, because I may inject a real estate example here or there. Okay, so for a long time, my job has been de-hyping AI, right? Going to leaders and saying, look, please don't throw a bunch of money at a dispersed or some AI team sitting at Georgia Tech that you've spun up and expect good results. It's not going to happen. What you should be doing is thinking about the problem first and then going from there. There's always been a huge hype around, overhype around AI. This feels markedly different. And the reason it feels markedly different, and I think a lot of us have experienced this, is because of the quality of the performance. Two things: the quality of the performance of these models. These models have been around forever, right? 10, 15 years. We crossed a threshold where suddenly the quality of the performance of these models actually feels useful, for whatever that metric is, right? The graph at the bottom are searches. This is the other thing I wanted to point out. In a lot of ways, this has become a bit of a Netscape moment. I'm going to date myself here, but back when the internet was very early, right? Nobody knew how to access it, and there was browsers before, but the Netscape came out and suddenly everybody knew how to access the internet. That's what's happened with ChatGPT, and that's some of the usage patterns you're seeing here, search patterns you're seeing here, experiencing this absolutely massive spike. So the two things going forward are the quality, and they are related, obviously. And now I almost never run into anybody that hasn't experienced it or hasn't engaged with at least a conversation around the art of the possible. And at a leadership or executive or board level, this is anything anybody ever seems to want to talk about these past 6 months. So I'm sure you are all getting a ton of questions around how we're applying this to our products and how we're applying this to our daily lives. And those questions are coming from very real places where folks are actually trying to figure out what the strategic implications of all of this are and the pace at which it's going to move. And that pace is accelerating massively, right? So there's a paper that Microsoft wrote, actually, I believe it's Microsoft's research, that drilled into how much of the tasks we have are going to be automatable, right? Right now, the thought process is it's about 15% if you're thinking about ChatGPT standalone. But once we start to layer applications, there's a significant amount of labor market disruption. Whether that translates into jobs or just productivity is a big question. But there's a significant amount of work that could be automated through some of these models and the specialized applications on these models. Part of the reason this is accelerating so quickly is because large language models are not all that complicated, and I'll explain how they work. But when you drop them into more processing power, they perform better, and the processing power has accelerated significantly. And so, if you think about here the parameters and the words and tokens, which is how you measure what large language model is capable of, the acceleration you had between GPT-3 and GPT-4 is absolutely massive. Oh, by the way, I should have asked, does anybody not have access to, if they don't have access to an OpenAI account, please sign up for it, but does anybody not have access to GPT-4? Anyway, we'll get to that in the demo a bit, but in any case, the other thing that really struck me is there's some Microsoft research that came out that was showing that early forms of GPT-4, which was much smarter than later forms, right? When you release one of these models, you're gonna want to dumb it down to make sure it doesn't do crazy things that it shouldn't be doing. So there's a process of sort of, I shouldn't say sharpening, it's actually dulling that happens after that. In fact, if you use GPT a lot, you've seen the performance and the quality drop significantly over the past couple of weeks since a couple of updates got pushed, because there's always a trade-off between performance and accuracy. In any case, the early models were showing sparks of general intelligence. So this isn't a talk around the philosophy of general intelligence and what it means, and it's really not relevant. If your AI is making decisions or pretending to make decisions, but it's smart enough to function at an average person's level, there's a lot of productivity and implications to that. So that is moving very, very quickly. Oopsies, wrong way. Okay, so what does that mean for product? The direction I think we're going in is a lot more versatility in mixed teams, right? With the potential uptick in productivity, especially around language. The trend I think we're going to be leaning into, and again, this is just one person's opinion. So the trend around where we're leaning into is a lot more mixed pods. Agile was always organized around software demand being higher than software supply. And some of that might become or start to become balanced a little more as code generation becomes more and more reliable. And we're already seeing some of that. And so the trend we're seeing for early adopters is a lot more mixed teams, and that means more market-facing teams connected directly to the software production capacity, right? We've always been a group of folks that fills a gray space. Again, as we get more velocity, it's increasingly important that we learn how to navigate the frameworks and needs of that gray space in order to be able to know how to engage AI to get the most out of it. And that means learning how to hire AI to do parts of the job that you're doing today. Means getting more proficient at moderating and deploying frameworks and leaning into things that are value added. Like design thinking and things that are absolutely required to engage in sort of the organizations or people in a very nuanced way. So all that is to say these things are great at certain tasks, they're terrible at planning, and they're going to be terrible at planning for a while. Anybody that's used AutoGPT has realized it actually is not very good. It's just kind of a toy. But the principle of it very much is there. Okay. So how does it work? Large language models are a bit like a parrot, so we'll use a parrot analogy. So meet ParrotGPT. ParrotGPT is a really well-trained parrot. Like you give it everything, and again, I'm sure this is somewhat familiar, but bear with me. You give it the internet, you give it documents, you give it books, you give it Wikipedia, academic articles, and you unleash it on an algorithm. And what that algorithm's job is to predict the next word. That's all. That's all the algorithm's trying to do, right? The way you predict the next word is at a very simple level, actually very straightforward. If you train it on a single sentence, you're looking at the amount of time probabilistically that the next word is going to come up. And so if you take this, I think this is a Hunter S. Thompson quote, and you think about how many times you have certain sentences, certain things coming after other things, like there's a have and an almost after I, and it counted after I. So there's a 33% chance effectively that after I, you're going to have one of these three words. That's kind of how it works. It starts to get much more complicated because if you do just that, it's not going to be very good. So you need to train it on a series of words. Trigrams, you need to train it on complicated strings. And the way you do that is through neural networks. The neural networks sound complicated, but they're actually just calculus, and they're predicting functions at scale, at large computational scale. So at the basic kind of form of it, that's how these neural networks, or sorry, that's how these large language models work. The big breakthrough, there's a couple, has really been around things like attention and vector embedding. So what vector embedding allows you to do is create a numerical value, sort of an ID, around certain words. Every single word has a different value, so even if it's spelled differently, and it's positioned on multidimensional space next to words that have similar meaning. The way that meaning is derived is through context and through attention, because not every word in a sentence is as meaningful. So that those vector embeddings are stored in, again, as numbers that represent a location in multidimensional space, and vectors are trained on attention. And again, that's another big breakthrough, is rather than training on an entire sentence, you train on the 3 or 4 words that actually provide meaning within that sentence. So if you deploy it, comes the reinforcement learning piece part. The more you engage with it, the more you tell it when it's doing something right or wrong, the stronger that algorithm gets. And what you get when you combine all of that stuff, that is this sort of next word prediction, coupled with the information you have from the vector embeddings, that great proximity around context, stuff it with the whole internet or some form thereof in a neural network, and then give it a really, really, really powerful processor, you get something that's actually pretty good at least seeming like it understands what you're talking about. And in some of these cases, right, the context you're giving it, the information it's using to predict the next word is, 30,000 tokens, right? That kind of thing. Although those models were said to be available, but they do not seem to be available to us. Okay, so I want to stop there and see if this is tracking so far, guys. Okay. And by the way, I'm sure there's much more sophisticated points that I missed. So if anyone's actually a machine learning engineer or has that background, forgive me if I missed anything or oversimplified anything. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the way you ask these models actually matters. If you think about how these models were trained and how they're located within multidimensional space. And by the way, the new OpenAI models, the hypothesis is that they've gotten dumber because and faster because there's actually multiple models sitting behind them and a model sitting in front that's curating where questions go. So it's recognizing that a question deals with physics and it's sending it to the model that's really good at physics, which increases the need for really good prompt engineering, because if you want
kind of like a gateway,
that's right.
Receptionist kind of redirecting you to which one of the two or the other, right?
That's right. That's right. So the result is you get a less insightful response. It's a less multidisciplinary response than you might have gotten a month ago, right? But it's a faster response, and OpenAI might actually have a business model if they get all that working. But the point is, you when you're accessing language, you have to think about the search space as being human language. So if you want access to language that's literary, you have to speak to it in a way that's literary. Or if you want access to language that's within a business framework or within a healthcare framework, you have to speak that language, or you have to try to get the context built in. You don't have to speak that language. You have to figure out a way to chain of thought prompt that context. I'll go into that a little bit. That's why you have wildly different responses, by the way, from asking it simple things in one way or another. So things are pretty good as a result in anything that's language-based. And a lot of what we do is language-based because it involves creating artifacts, interacting with people, and translating between departments that don't talk to each other, right? It's created speaking like a person, translating human generated text. It's got versatility, it's got variety. That's the big difference between this and AIs that came before it that were purposefully built to do something, to predict a customer churn or something like that. It's general purpose, right? The things that it is less strong at, because they are not language things by nature, math and logic. The models don't think, and they're really not very good at doing math. You're going to have much better results using a calculator or Excel. Planning and understanding. If you ask it to plan something out, it's really bad at doing executive thinking and planning, which is again kind of a point for us on the product side. They're really expensive to run for the most part. This is, I think, less true, right? By the time I made when I made this slide a little while back, we did not have models like Vicuna and Llama that are extremely cheap to run. And yeah, exactly. The model is only as good as the information you put into it. You have some control over that. I bet some of your organizations are spinning up internal models now that you can interact with that are trained on your documents. There's a ton of label leakage that goes on, not label leakage, but data leakage that goes on. So organizations have to be really careful not to share PII or information that's confidential inside of OpenAI. But this is one of the reasons that we're seeing organizations spinning up internal models. They can control where that data goes and where that data comes out of, for sure. And another thing that happens quite a bit is hallucination. So we'll talk about all these things. These are all things that we can mitigate. But these models will make stuff up. You ask them to give you research back around, some disease vector or whatever it is, and they'll spit back. You ask them to cite those references, they'll spit back articles and references that don't exist. They'll look real. But remember, its job is to predict the next word. So all it's doing is assembling the thing that's supposed to look real. So we've got to be careful about some of those things and use this as a tool, but not necessarily trust it, or be very careful about how we trust it, right? So again, it can't be situationally aware. It's bad at planning. There's model drift that happens. GPT got worse, right? And to get the best results, we got to invest time in prompt architecture. Data privacy is going to be a problem. Bias is going to be a problem. That's going to be true everywhere. It's also going to be true with people. So as much as bias is an issue that you hear talked about in AI ethics conversations, these can also be tools against bias, right? So I often use ChatGPT to actually check my my writing to see if it's biased or inherently biased in my interactions with maybe another group, and that could be in any kind of context, right? So again, how you use it makes all the difference. But the data you train it on, if it's biased, the responses are going to be biased. The bigger point is these models are trained on us. So whatever they give back to us is the way kind of collectively we've put information together. And do with that what you will, but more than any time in the past, ethics and really thinking through how to responsibly use these models is more important than ever. And it's everybody's responsibility, because it's going to be a long time before there's effective policy legislation, even at the corporate level. Okay, so let's get into it. What we're going to do is do some best practices around prompting. We're going to talk about role prompting, context, structure, clarity, and examples. So 0 shot, 1 shot, few shot, chain of thought, and then chaining. If anyone's familiar with these concepts, feel free to pop them in the chat or raise your hand. If not, that makes me really happy because I get to introduce some of these things. With that, has anybody used any of these techniques? Can you just raise your hand if you have, just out of curiosity? Jason? Okay, cool. Awesome. All right. Okay, so a simple problem. And you guys are more than welcome, by the way, to follow along in ChatGPT or in the playground to test some of these things out. The results you get are extremely different. So let's take this simple math problem, right? We know a calculator can solve this. A middle schooler can solve this problem without much effort. OpenAI, or these LLMs have a really hard time solving this problem. It's literally all over the place. These are responses, and so if I prompted this thing, I think 35, no, I forget how many times, 10, 20 times, I got no right answers. It's easy to say, okay, it's bad at math. Again, the reason I'm starting here is because this is going to help us illustrate how to actually get the results you want, because those same concepts are going to carry through what we're going to be doing together. Okay. So the way you ask definitely matters, but you can roll prompt. When you tell the model what its job is, so we've tried teacher and mathematician, and we've tried all these different ways to ask this question, it starts to actually get it right sometimes. It now positions itself into a context that makes sense for it. It can, incidentally, funny enough, it did better when you roll prompted it as a teacher than as a mathematician. So take that for what it is. But it was right about 15% of the time. Not a great result. Oh, by the way, I should point out if you're kind of informal and rude to it, I think I get her done was my worst one. The way you ask matters. Just pointing that out. Okay, so structure. You take those same prompts and you create some basic structure, some spacing. You start to get the right answer a little bit more. So now I've improved my results by 1x, right? By 2x. I've doubled the accuracy. So using the same prompts with a cleaner structure, I'm at 30%. Chain of thought prompting is something that allows the LLM to go through more structure or logical thinking, or you're asking it to. So all we said here, as we said here, you're a math teacher, show your work. And then we prompted it with those same exact prompts, right? And we got from 30% accuracy to 90% accuracy. This is really powerful because when I talked earlier about engaging it in domains that it needs to understand, one of the ways to do that, let's say you're working on a healthcare product and you are not familiar with healthcare language, right? You might ask it to give you information back about a certain condition as a chain of thought prompt. And only then, even though you know that answer, but it'll spit back that answer based on that kind of language area. And then you can follow it up with the questions you actually want to ask. And now you've sort of seeded it. You've primed the model with information that it has to situate itself. So again, here, all we're doing is saying, show your work. We can also give it examples, right? Once we give it examples, it knows how to return those examples. This is particularly useful if you're trying to generate sample data, or if you're trying to classify data or convert it. But it produces significantly better results when you start to use one-shot and few-shot prompting rather than just open-ended questions, right? So here are some statistics around the differences between multiple shots, right? So 0-shot versus 3-shot versus 25-shot, and the accuracy rates that come in. You can see they get significantly better the more examples you give inside the prompt. Okay, very meta, right? Prompting for prompts. I do this all the time, by the way, right? And it's really useful. You have a prompt that works. Now generate a bunch of prompts that will be better than the prompt that you had that works. And it's pretty good at generating prompts that produce results. So, we get 67% accuracy from 30% accuracy just by asking it to come up with its own prompts. Multi-prompt context. I'm not going to read through this, but this is a chain of thought prompt in a bit of a different way. It's sort of seeding, generating knowledge before actually asking the question. So again, this is back to that healthcare example. If you want to seed it with information, you can ask it a question, a strategically placed question, and then you can ask it follow-ups. So you get something that actually has a lot of components, and you got to bring it together. You've got your knowledge prompt, your role, additional instructions, some examples, and then we're giving the LLM the permission to do an evaluation and ask questions. So this is an example template. This works really well for almost anything. We're going to use this same framework over and over today. Anybody use prompts this way? Or is this sort of new? Okay. Yeah, this is Jason does.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm probably not as robust as the template that you've got on the screen, but I think I've used most of those techniques in various prompts, maybe not all together in this complete of a way.
Perfect. By the way, this is supposed to work. The reason I'm sharing this specifically with you, there are ways to do this with like ChatGPT that are less robust and still get decent results by making it conversational. The reason we're talking about it this way is because increasingly I find a lot of value in the flexibility to go directly to the API and prompt to get the answer I want, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that, and part of them is because we're entering into a world where we can use multiple models, and just thinking about things that way makes it easier. If you do put this into ChatGPT, you are going to get better results, but this is something that you can port into something like a playground. Okay, so sum it all up, we've got some really good results by generating knowledge prompts with some two-shot prompting. Both of those techniques got us 100% accuracy compared to the raw prompt, which is how most folks use ChatGPT, right? Is just raw prompting. The results there, we had no accurate results, right? Also, it's interesting that the actual distribution of the output was dramatically different based on the techniques. So each of these things provide value. Each of these things put together into one are going to be great ways to make sure that you're getting the most or best result that you can. All right, I'm going to show you an application example just to point out one thing. This is sort of a language-based issue. A couple of reasons here. The first is that most of the, I think, AI-enabled software we're going to see coming out lives in a context in the future. Behind it is going to be one of these open-faced models. So I think it's valuable to understand how they work, how these chatbots work, but also to see it in context. I think it also helps because I want to talk about hallucination and how to prevent that. Okay.
Misha,
Yes.
on the previous two slides, when you said, you feed it the prompt, does the sequence of the order matter as well?
I found that for me it does.
Okay.
I should point out that like nobody's an expert at this, right? We're all figuring it out. You guys have probably worked with techniques that work really well. But some of the tools I'm going to show you will enable you to test that order.
Okay.
I found that that structure works best for me.
Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, be iterative, try. And again, if anybody tells you they're an expert and they know exactly how to get the most out of these models, nobody really knows how they work. I mean, not in reality, right? We're all figuring it out. Okay, so when you see an application getting built and someone's hitting the API, the prompt that's getting designed, like let's say there's a chatbot, there's a prompt and then there's an input. So whatever you put in the chat box actually lives inside of that prompt. So somebody's crafted the prompt around the input. Anytime you interact, like I've seen a couple of presentation apps come to the market, there are prompts around there that narrow the scope of what these APIs are going to push out, and then provide templates and examples for how to get the information back and translate them into front end, right? And all you're giving it is the input here. That's important because every time you interact with one of these bots, it's providing some slice of the conversation, only as much as the token is going to be able to provide you. In this case, we were building just a tenant chatbot. So we're feeding it some information. I wanted to point out a few things. I'm gonna go pretty quickly. So I wanted to do this exercise without actually doing anything, just using ChatGPT to give me all the information, so hypotheticals. So what we went ahead and did is we asked it to build us an app. We used some chain of thought responses and some context responses here. So we're asking it about the chatbot and some of the services that it might be able to provide. The tone, structure, and clarity is something I'm fishing for here. And what I'm getting out is a set of sample data that I'm going to use in my application. Right, creating some role prompt options here. So I'm prompting for prompts. I'm using a few shot prompt technique here. So you're a tenant chatbot named Dave, your office concierge service, you've got a background in hospitality, that kind of thing. And it's spitting back some roles. I'm going to use some of these roles. I'm storing them somewhere offline. And then I'm prompting for some variants so I can have some testing material to check my prompts. I'm going to have my concrete ask now after all of that, right? And it's important to note that what I want to point out here is it's really helpful to give permission to these chatbots to ask you questions. So I'm saying specifically, at the end, encourage it to say, I'm not sure, I don't have the information. And so it's created some prompts for me that are actually going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to create the structure. It's going to spit out some more prompts that help me check for understanding. And now I've got my architecture. And this is how I've arranged it for this particular chatbot. Again, I'm feeding it specific information about my building, and I'm going to talk to it, right? So you're an office concierge. Here's my role prompt. You have a background in hospitality. Your job is to chat with employees and help them answer questions about amenities, right? More context, this is a building. We've got several amenities available. Here are my amenities. It's worth noting, by the way, these things are really good with Markdown, better than CSVs and that kind of thing. So for whatever reason, I'm not sure why, but I've had much better results with Markdown than I have with other formats, right? More details here, and then some examples. So this is my shot prompts. Here's my I don't know question. Accuracy is key. If the information is not available to you or you're not sure, please respond, I'm not sure, or I don't have the information. And now please respond to the query. And so the tenant query is going to be, what can I do in the building? So on the back end, all the tenant sees is this box. What can I do in the building? This is what's going on in the background, right? Every time we send a prompt in with the API, we're feeding it this, and then the AI is going to spit that out. Okay, so it's great. It works. Are you copying and pasting? Yes, I'm Markdown. I'm copying and pasting Markdown into the chat. You can do CSV into the chat too, and it's fine. It'll get it. But it seems to do better with Markdown. Sometimes it helps. I'm not sure if it's just me, but sometimes it helps to delineate it with some kind of symbol. I've seen quotation marks used. I've seen squiggly lines used, but it does seem to help structure it a little bit. But in any case, okay, what can I do in the building? It's going to give me some great information about the amenities. So it's a good output here. Oh, great, I'd love to swim in the swimming pool. How do I use it? So it gives me some more information. And then we asked it about eating food. This is information we didn't bring to it, right? And it turns around and starts to hallucinate. Sorry, eating food and bringing pets are not allowed. Well, that may be true, and it's a reasonable answer, but it actually doesn't know that that's our policy. So that's a problem. So there's some things we can do to help alleviate that. And key there is, again, to share some negative prompt information to help reduce the possibility of hallucination. So here, what we've done, we've got our accuracies key. That didn't seem to help. So what I'm asking it to do is to review the past conversations on the data provided about the amenities, and I want it to classify. So indicate if the AI is explicitly validated by the data or just inferred. What it does is it goes through all those questions, and then what it's doing is classifying those as explicitly validated, not validated, or inferred. Then I'm turning around and saying,
would it be useful to like also just input all the policy information, like take your document that's all your policies and feed it in so that if something gets asked, like what you're talking about, the swimming pool, the food, then it could reference the policies?
So this is the bit at the top here is the bit at the top here is the policy information we've given it, but it will make stuff up if the information's not there.
Right.
So that's what we're trying to do.
On that same topic Diane brought up, can you overwhelm the model by giving it too much information, copy and paste it in?
You can. There's a limit to how many tokens you can feed it. And one of the reasons, if you're putting a lot of information into the model, it starts to forget the conversations from above, if you're using a chatbot, is because it's actually not looking at them. The window of consideration is moving down the chat. So you can overwhelm it. One of the things you can do is prompt it for summaries. So you say, okay, summarize what we've talked about into 500 characters and use that, right? Yeah, so exactly. You can give it can it give suggestions based on the prompt? Yeah, it absolutely. It's really good at stuff like that, right? At sort of human interaction. The key here I'm trying to point out is that we've given it some information to feed on. By the way, there are much more sophisticated ways to do it. There's chain prompting. There's like we're not going to touch on any of that. But the useful bit here is that I've got my prompt and it's not giving me the perfect answers I want. So I'm asking it to review its own response, classify its own responses, and then I'm giving it explicit directions to tell me I don't know or I'm not sure. When I do that, we actually get really, really good results, right? So this becomes, if you look at it in its totality, right? This becomes, and by the way, Eric, you asked about size. It takes a lot to overwhelm the model. If you're using GPT-4, if you're using smaller models, you can be more judicious about it. So there's that, right? And then some of the newer models coming out, I'm hearing things like 70,000 tokens, that kind of thing. So while GPT-4 is supposed to be 32,000 tokens, which is basically like a half a book that you can feed it and it can consider in the response. In reality, the API, I think, only lets you get up to like 4,000 or 7,000 tokens, something like that. I'm not sure how that all happened, but in theory, that model's capable of a lot more. But in any case, now I am looking at this prompt in its totality. So what I've got is I've got my all the data that I shared with you guys from up here, my original prompt, and then I've got my additional context And now when I'm engaging it, after it's read through this classification, it knows that its job is to be accurate. There are, by the way, other things you can do on the API parameters that give you some control about this, but this is just on prompt, right? Has anybody else had any luck with techniques to prevent hallucination, by the way? Oopsies. Okay, so I'll touch on this chaining thing only to the extent that it's, I think, valuable to understand, right? If you think about that application, we've got our original prompt, we've got our human questions, the bot answers, the summarized prompt, the validation prompt, asking if it's hallucinating, sample return, the I don't know prompts, and then the human questions and answers. You can't fit everything into one chat. So what you're seeing here is you're seeing different chains, different prompt chains, and we're compressing some of these by asking the LLM to output summarizations that we're going to put into the next chain. Again, this is partly why quality tends to go down the more you talk to it, or it tends to forget before, but you can mitigate some of that by getting into the habit of having it spit out summarization prompts and then including that so that it stays refreshed. It's also highly useful in building applications. Okay, so I'll stop. That was a lot, and we're about to go play with some stuff. But before we do that, anybody have any other questions or thoughts? What's up, Eric?
So, so it takes to do all this prompt engineering. You probably could have wrote or that article you're doing, or the thing for the tenants. How do you scale that? Can you reuse those same prompts then for the next property or the next unit? Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, that's right. So if you kind of look back at this architecture, the only thing the user's putting in is the input. Everything else is actually sent in the API call along with the prompt. So all they're putting in is when it says human, that's the input. They're asking, what can I do in the building?
All in the context of the chat.
Yep, all in the context of the chat. And then the way that this is done, there are libraries called, one example I think is sort of the one that everyone's using is LangChain that are specifically designed to string these together.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay. Let's get into it. All right, so what do we use it for on the product side, right? Again, gray space role, the key is to build sort of the stuff that you need for your organization. So this is less about being prescriptive around this is how you use it as a product manager, and it's going to be more around examples. But at a high level, I can put it into a couple of categories. Creating materials for internal and external audiences, artifacts, processing large amounts of data and unstructured data. This is really cool, by the way, because before, if you have a bunch of client emails and you want to understand sentiment, no one's going to sit there and read through it. With LLMs, you can take them, dump them in, assuming there's no private information there, or maybe you have your own model, and actually get sentiment out of that. So I love these models for research and for processing large amounts of information. Checking materials, assumptions for gaps in your knowledge. This is also really great. Like take your epics or your user stories, put them in the model and say, hey, repeat back to me what you think this says. And you're going to get some really interesting answers, right? What are the, pretend you're a software engineer and tell me what issues you're going to have with this user story. And then it'll spit out some issues and you can prompt it to improve your user story, right? Some of those techniques, like think about it almost as not just an assistant, but how do you use it to bounce ideas off of, brainstorming, that kind of thing. Crafting communication, rapid prototyping and artifact creation, right? These models are fairly decent at writing code. They're fairly decent at creating graphs in Python. Like they're not gonna, you're not gonna be writing applications with them, but they're great at rapid prototyping or illustrating concepts. Self-improvement. I use this all the time for, again, asking the LLM if if my artifacts are cohesive, if my strategy has holes in it, if my communication with my team could be improved, more inclusive, they're fantastic for that. And checking and validating user stories, right? Don't trust everything that's going to come out of it. I've talked about this a bunch already, please. Eric, I'm sorry, you raised your hand?
Yeah. So obviously super fancy, right? Especially when you get into the user stories and epics. Have you heard of use cases where people actually use it for story mapping, where you might just dump in a concept or sort of story mapping, like
Yep.
user journeys, like, hey, here's kind of a process. Bullet.
Yep.
Turn this into a story map.
Yeah, we're gonna do some of that. We're gonna use jobs
Okay.
to be done, but that's exactly what we're gonna do. Yeah. Awesome. So again, just one more caveat here. Your job is to edit, curate, and organize. It's not to trust. Like, they're not very good product managers if you trust them with all your stuff. Like, they're pretty mediocre. Like, you don't want to trust them with too much stuff. But they're better than no product manager, but they're not great. Your job is to figure out how to hire them, edit, organize, and curate. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about agents too in the next bit, and that's going to be, you want your different conversations to reflect the roles that you're going to assign it. Some of the ways to approach this, right? Assemble, design your product management process. Like, you already know what this is. For your organization, what are some of the artifacts? What's the process? How do you get it into collateral that you can use or templates you can use inside of these bots to help with your work, to give it the context. Build those assets out into usable ways, and then practice hiring the models, training them to help, and that kind of thing, right? Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna pick a focus area.
Hey,
You guys.
Misha, before we move to that, Mike's got a hand up if you want to.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike.
Yeah, no worries. I joined late, so my apologies if you already discussed this, but back on your prior examples, using it for Epic's user stories, obviously companies' policies are going to differ, but do you have any thoughts about doing that and just kind of, hey, once we give this data up to, once we give it up to Google, once we give it up to ChatGPT, like, we don't own it anymore. So if we put information in there about what's on our roadmap, there are concerns as to who might see that data. And again, my apologies, I joined late, so if you already discussed that, I'll rewatch the replay, but just curious if that's come up.
No worries, I can't emphasize that point enough, because we have talked about it a few times, but it's a great time to talk about it again. Don't share private data or confidential data with public large language models. You got one in-house and your policies are that you can share them in-house, great. Someone's making sure the security's there, or you have a way to engage the models without sharing private confidential data, fine. Do that. Don't go out sharing PII. There's security concerns, and there's also leakage concerns for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Matt, what's up?
Hi, Misha. Thanks for your time today. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I know you're about to get into the exercise here, so I don't want this to detract from that. Time permitting, could you review how an organization would go about setting up a private model with their own IP? Just in line with what Mike just brought up, a lot of those product management artifacts and a lot of the information that goes in there is sensitive information. It's intellectual property. It's people's ideas and thoughts. So we would want to pipe that into a private model or an internal model, as opposed to feeding that to the larger universe of Google or OpenAI.
Yeah, and I'll say that's outside the scope of today, but depending on your infrastructure, like we're on GCP. GCP has like a one-button private LLM you can launch, and there's other LLMs, Hugging Face. We're experimenting right now with Vicuna that can be deployed internally. So chances are somebody in your organization is already thinking about how to make an LLM available internally, and if they are not, there definitely should be. I do also think that the privacy and some of the terms and conditions problems are going to be solved at some point as well. So that's I think it's a temporary problem around leakage. Really, Microsoft's use of this, and if you think about something like their coding assistant, right, Codex, I forget what it's called, but it doesn't get any more private than sharing code in VS Code, right? And that's deployed in a ton of enterprise. So I'm not advocating for sharing confidential information, but it's something that feels like it's going to get resolved as this space evolves, whether it's internal private clouds or better policies on some of the products that are there.
I didn't know if anyone had any resources on or articles on just getting started or anything that we might want to check out. So if you do,
Absolutely.
just put those in the chat.
Drop me a line, Matt. If you go to wiredcognition.com, there's a contact page, and I'm happy to show some stuff.
Okay, thanks.
Anthony?
Hey, Misha, how's it going? I had a question on like the way these models take in feedback. So if I was a competitor to OpenAI and it was giving me good responses, like can I just say that those are wrong, those are bad responses? So like how do companies protect against like sabotage? Because through an API, anyone can just like go ahead and consistently sabotage it, and that might also be a reason why these models like decline in quality, right?
Yeah, you'd have to. There's a feedback loop that some of these models get into. The amount of weight you use from the feedback is up to you when you deploy these models, right? And there's a lot of tech and strategy to try to mitigate model drift. I will say, if you're going to go and attack a model by giving it bad results, it's going to be a very expensive exercise for you. I'm not sure it's worth the squeeze.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was just wondering, I mean, is model, feedback, fraud detection a new market? I don't know.
It definitely is. There's a lot of burgeoning startups that are less so on the training fraud side, more so on the like same way we used to worry about SQL injection, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Let's get into it. I'm not sure if it makes more sense to pick a single focus area, but let's actually do that. If you guys can you guys drop in the chat some ideas around industries or areas of focus, because we're going to use that. And I want to do it in real time. I think it'd be much more fun. So it could be anything, just whatever comes to mind. If you have an industry in mind, anything else? I'm really hoping for a bunch of these so we can spit them into ChatGPT. Space exploration, I love it. Okay. All right. Okay. Ooh, carbon trading. So folks, please feel free to open up whatever LLM you use and follow along with me. I'm going to use a combination of stuff. And we'll go from there. Okay. Can you guys see my browser? All right. So
Yes.
perfect. So this is a tool. This is a prompt IDE called Prometheus that I discovered actually this week. And what it does is systematizes some of the variable variations. So I'm just going to use it occasionally today, not too much. But I am able to sort of select my models and choose between different models. But in any case, what I'm going to do is prompt it about being it's a design thinking facilitator. They're actively facilitating a prompt engineering workshop, and this is the system variable. So if you go to the playground, it used to be that when you engaged with the OpenAI playground or with the API, this is all you got. Recently, they just released GPT-4 general availability on the API. It used to be that the only way to access GPT-4 was through chat. So a lot of these conversations we had was through chat, but this is brand new. And they've also created an interface on the playground where they set up the system variables separately. The context, the role prompt, all that goes into the system prompt here, and then the user input goes here. So that's all this is. This just gives me a bit more flexibility. So you're a design thinking facilitator. You're actively facilitating a prompt engineering workshop. I'll provide you with a list of ideas and industries. You'll analyze them and recommend an industry to focus on so that it's, what do we want to optimize for? Fun? Most interesting and fun. Okay, let's do that. All right, so we've got yeah, so question around whether to be in the playground or ChatGPT. It's whatever you're comfortable with. Let's add a block here. I'm gonna remove everybody's names per that privacy problem.
I'm guessing most of us are in Chat GPT. Is there a prompt feature within Chat GPT we should be putting this stuff in? Or
ChatGPT is absolutely fine. So I can go ahead.
Is there a feature where you want to prompt stuff, or we're just typing it straight into it?
We're going to type it straight in. Here out of Prometheus, what I could do is preview my prompt. And
okay.
I'm going to go ahead and do that. So this is just, again, a bit of a productivity hack. It lets me, and yeah, ChatGPT is perfectly fine. The amount of time I use it, and I run out of prompt credits after about 30 minutes. So I'm going to put that whole prompt in here, and we're going to take that bit out, and we'll see what happens. Okay, in the meantime, by the way, I'm going to share a couple of documents with you guys. So some templates. So these should be, you can copy them if you want to edit. If not, feel free. And again, we're going to keep this interactive. So if anybody has any really cool results, let me know. Space declaration. Okay, so which one sounds like sounds like ChatGPT thinks we should focus on space. So let's do this. Create a company and mission statement and vision for a unique space exploration company. So everything we're going to do from here on in is going to be using some of these pre-vetted prompts. And again, this is just an exercise of showing you the art of the possible. Please don't do this in real life. Curate them appropriately, but I'll give you guys a bit of context. The two documents I shared with you were this canvas. This is a prompt canvas that we built, and what it does is it starts with a list of framework prompts here that I'm going to go through. I'm building a new product in the space exploration journey. I guess we're going to modify it and see what happens. And these are the frameworks we're going to use. So we're going to focus on new product build. It's important to note, right, not everyone is in new product mode. If you actually go to our framework inventory here, I can filter down to the stage. So we've got this broken up. Again, take this, make it yours, throw it away, whatever you want to do with it. But this is just the way I think about it. So take it with a grain of salt, right? So the 4 phases, introduction, growth, maturity, and decline, are going to be different product management problems, right? We're focusing on introduction today, just because a lot of the, I think, more interesting artifacts get generated at introduction, kind of covers a broader span. But the idea here is that I may want to just focus on, let's say, growth, and I can take these artifacts and I could use these artifacts. Again, don't use this verbatim, right? This should match your product management process. And here I'm using artifacts heavily borrowed from jobs to be done and pragmatic marketing, and then some agile artifacts. So I'll walk you through kind of what's in here. We're going to build all these frameworks out, or many of them out, sort of in real time together for our space exploration company. We've got some prompts that we've pre-vetted. So we've got our system and role prompt. This is what I'm saying. You can use the playground if you want. This is just stock fodder here. Again, you can tweak this to see what the results are going to be like if you'd like. This references the mission and vision statements. This is additional context and background that you're going to need for these prompts. And then we've got our actual ask. So your task is to, and our ask is going to go here. We're going to have some additional examples, and then we're going to have our 1-shot, 2-shot feedback and permission block. We don't have to use all of them all the time, right? But they're there. Those are the sort of basic components. So we'll start with the problem statements. That's a good place to start, I think. So what we'll do, we've got our mission and vision. I'm going to go ahead and store that. And by the way, it really does help. The reason I'm sort of sharing this with you, all these inventories and templates, again, you can pull from here, you can build your own, but these are some of the things that go into that spreadsheet. Exactly. So again, they're helpful, but they're just starting points. Make them your own. What I'll do is in my prompt canvas, I'm going to rejigger some of these. So please feel free. I'd love for you all to follow along with this. So I'm going to put my mission and my vision in here. And I'm going to store it because I'm going to reference it later. I want that information in there. Now, this isn't very efficient for the purposes of a prompt. So I'm going to summarize them together to make it about my company or whatever. I'm sure there's better ways to articulate that. Stellar Horizons. By the way, what do we think of that name? Do we like it? It's okay. Okay. What do we think of the mission statement? Anybody have any feedback on this? Or not the mission statement? Pretty stellar. I like it. All right. We'll go ahead and stick that into this high-level context. All right. So it's in the high-level context, which means it's going to sort of show up here. Okay. And we've got that there. So in this case, I'm using a user researcher role. For each of these roles, if you sort of look at my ChatGPT window, I've actually got different roles set up. And I'm not going to use the same window for each role, because it's going to confuse the model, and we want them to do different things. So I'm going to start a new role, and I'm going to do some market sensing here. All I'm going to do as a user researcher, the firm you're working with is Stellar Horizons. And here's information about Stellar Horizons. I promise it's all there under the fold. Additional context about your role. Your job is to evaluate market opportunities and user problems in early stage to uncover problem statements that can be used for the product, etc. Reviewing competitors, direct feedback, that kind of thing. I've got a problem template here. I've got some examples here, and the problem template, basically I just took from here. And that's just this, right? So I'm going to grab all this. And what I'd like to ask you guys to do is do the same thing on your end. Go ahead and paste it into a new chat. And then I want you to review it and sort of clean it up and make any modifications you think make sense, right? So I'm going to keep this here just for cleanliness, but let's see if we can get some different results. And then let's run it and see what happens. So we've got our mission for everyone. By the way, in case y'all, it's shift and enter inside of this if you want to create spaces. Okay, additional context about Cherre. I'm just going to space this out so it's a little cleaner to read for us. This is, by the way, why it's helpful to have an IDE. Okay. Do you guys use these kind of problem templates? Early stage? Okay. So again, depending on the framework, it's whatever. Whatever you're using. Okay, so this is going to be a pretty fat prompt. Let's hope it works.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now I think I'm ready to go. I've got my, is the task clear? Please feel free to follow up feedback. Let's answer the questions. All right, so let's run this. I want to point something out really quick. So you see how it asked me some follow-up questions? This is really good. This is what we want. If I was to take that out and I was to rerun this, I get a very different result. So now it's trying its best. Models really want to do what they're being asked to do, right? You have to give them permission to ask follow-ups. So I'm actually not going to engage it. I'm going to go with whatever is here, but in the real world, you'd absolutely have a conversation with it to get the most out of it. Okay, so this for me is a little verbose. And it's not really giving me some of the problems I'm looking for. But what I've done is I've already seeded it with kind of where I wanted to go. So oh, you know what? This has content from my this has content from my other. I'm going to rerun this, guys. I apologize. I forgot to replace this. Anybody have anything that they're happy with? Feel free to share it in the chat. Okay, I'm going to rerun this actually. Okay, this is a whole lot better. This makes more sense. Okay, so we got a space accessibility gap. We've got a data accessibility problem, interstellar communication challenges. What do y'all think? Which one should we go after? Or any follow-up questions here?
Well,
Let's
let's
just-
take the communication challenge.
Agreed.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Did anybody know there's an interstellar communication challenge?
Not in
There's always a communication challenge,
Yeah.
whether here or in space.
Great point.
Right. Okay. Anybody know if this is actually true? All right.
It's all a hallucination
Exactly.
in space.
The space, it's a 2001 Space Odyssey problem.
Thank you, Hal.
All right, so we've got our problem statement. Hopefully you already know your problem statement. But if you don't, this is one way you can get it into the format you need. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab that, and I'm gonna store it. And by the way, in case it's not obvious, this is, you know, if this thing was good at designing decks, this would just go into a deck for me. I don't know if you guys live in PowerPoint the way I do, but that would be the way to go. Okay, so obviously, if you're doing this in real life, you're going to review this, you're going to go back and forth, you're going to sharpen it and make sure it's actually applicable. You're going to potentially give it information about things that are relevant to it that it doesn't know. Like, you know, this is very different if, you know, I am a startup with 2 million in capital. Can you adjust the problem space to fit my my situation, whatever it is? There, small scale space communication challenge, right? This is where the curation comes in. You've got to think about this as somebody that doesn't know anything about your business, and you're hiring it to produce some of these artifacts. These artifacts in total are going to be useful when all said and done, but you have to give it a little bit of guidance. So we've got our problem statement or problem focus. I'm going to go ahead and grab that. Again, please feel free to follow along. Let's make sure that the task is correct. So the task is going to be please review the problem statement, select and create a jobs to be done map. That's actually a pretty good task. Let's go with that. Let's make sure we don't have any other weird contexts. That's a good question. It becomes really obvious when it does. I don't have a statistic for you, but I think it'd be neat to figure it out. Usually, I think 8,000 tokens. 8,000 tokens. It's tokens don't directly map to words, but it's sort of roughly that. Okay. So now I've got my problem statement embedded in my next prompt, right? Or if I don't, I could do that. I'm going to go ahead and stick that in. Again, I should probably clean this up. I'm going to also remove the follow-up question bits because I think you guys get the point there, but feel free to follow along. So here we're building a jobs to be done map. This is the same as a journey map, or I shouldn't say the same as a journey map, but this could be something that's a story map type thing as well. Anybody use jobs to be done? Okay, so obviously this is not going to generate.
Yes.
Like you're going to want to do this in, in a design thinking session, right? Potentially feed it data and then have it organize your jobs map. But I find it really interesting to generate job maps for roles that I'm new to, just to see what it knows about the content that's out there. So there may be other ways to translate some of these job maps into from context. And here's what I'll show we can do here. So here's a job map. We've got established communication. The current pain points is the space communication system struggle with delayed and interrupted lost signals. Okay, so we're kind of getting the task at hand. The problem is this is a hardware problem, and it's not really something that we're going to solve with agile backlog stuff. But we'll pretend that it's a software problem, and that'll be okay. Since we don't have any emails from customers and we don't have anything to actually inform this from the real world, I'm going to go ahead and collect some stuff. So what I can do as an example, this would be coming from, any area that kind of you're working in, you're collecting customer feedback, you have reviews, etc. I think we're focused in on the, what was our initiative? It was a communication challenge, right? So interstellar communication. And I actually love doing this for some of my products if I'm looking at market research, because these videos oftentimes, especially if you're working in a consumer space and you can get influencer videos and reviews and that kind of thing out of there, you can show transcripts. Right, so here I can actually grab my transcript and at least I'll give it some data, right? I don't know if this is relevant at all, but again, presumably you would. So if y'all want to grab whatever you can find and try this, feel free to follow along. But please review the. And actually for this, I'm going to create another role.
Or better when you use please and thank yous?
Say it again.
Does it work better when you use please and thank you?
It's how my mama taught me to talk. I don't know if it works or not, but it's, I don't know, does it?
Interesting.
I know it's a
I think when I put a please in it, it came back and went, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. Just because I said please. It was weird.
Yeah, it probably sets the tone for the response it uses.
It does. I've questioned whether it matters or not, and I've thought about each of those please and thank yous representing tokens as well that are kind of part of your total package. So I was like, do I waste words on courtesy or not with a machine?
Let's see if it gives us anything decent. Okay, so here it's pulling a couple of key points out of the transcription. if this was customer emails, you might ask it to classify sentiment, that kind of thing. All right. So I've got some summation. User researcher. Job map. Please produce. Okay, so I'm just going to compress this a bit. You know, I'm going to grab that whole thing. That's all. That's an awesome story. Yeah, it's a really good coach.
I have a quick question. It seems like as you're going through this process, you're getting closer and closer to where you're adding that information that would be confidential or private to your organization
Mhm.
In a public space, right? I mean, because you're going out here and you're trying to get what's out there on the internet as a whole to answer these business questions for yourself. How do you balance that?
Yeah, again, I think it depends on the policies of your organization and the risk tolerance. So I think a really good rule of thumb is don't say anything you wouldn't say in public. But these things will get better and the security around them will get better and private LLMs will become useful as well. So push this as much as you're comfortable pushing this. And, I would suggest every organization to have a security policy around their level of risk, right? If I am an ad tech organization, the risk of some of this leaking is very different than if I'm an insurance organization or healthcare tech, right? So use your best judgment is, I guess, the best suggestion I have. I'm sorry, that's a non-answer, but does anybody actually have policies in their organization saying that this can't be used in certain ways, but can in other ways?
And oh, sorry, go ahead.
My last company specified that it could only was a consulting firm, and it could only be used if you explicitly had authorization in the MSA for the client to use it, and got really specific about how it could be used in each MSA.
Yeah.
And I wasn't thinking in terms so much of the company's data or customer data. I was thinking more in terms of your ideas. Like as let's say you're ideating and you're coming up with this, you're looking to build out some type of new product, and you think that it could hit the market running, and here you are sharing it with the world in effect, right? As you're trying to gain information to help you build the business, you're sharing information about your idea that potentially someone could then.
I mean, correct.
But when we say we're sharing it out, I mean, who's looking? That's kind of, I'm not saying put sensitive information in there, but it's just kind of you want to have the policies and don't be sharing stuff that could potentially, that you wouldn't say in public. But then I'm also thinking of who's looking.
That's a good point. And it's not like, so there is problems with security where potentially actual, chats could be leaked. That's true with any technology. the way that your insights get ingested into the model, it's unlikely that anybody will ever see them that same way. So the other thing, and this is really, I think, more philosophical, so I think you've got to come to your own conclusions. But me personally, I think there's very few original thoughts. And as product people, we're collaborating with the world around us all the time. This is another point that helps us interface with the world around us. To the extent, if you're not sharing it, if you're not engaging the world around you, chances are somebody is, depending on what industry you're in. And then it's a question of, okay, IP, it's like when you're going to pitch a VC, and you ask him to sign an NDA, you're not pitching that VC, right? Nobody's going to do that. So when you're doing that, you're inherently sharing information about your IP with somebody who potentially has a very vested interest in understanding your IP without any protections, but you're doing it because the risk calculation is worth it. So you've got to make that decision on your own. Sorry, Manish, I think you raised your hand too.
No, I was just kind of basically agreeing with you, saying no to your philosophical comment.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to philosophize. Okay, so
And I think that makes sense, because if you think about it, anytime you're ideating over an idea that you feel is new, you're going to do some type of searching on the internet through Google or whatever to see what's out there already. And if that concerns you, then that's probably should. If that doesn't concern you, then that shouldn't concern you anymore, right?
Exactly. Okay, so we've got a bunch of artifacts actually we've created. We've got let's see, we've got company overview, we've got some personas. We're starting to build out like a corpus of things. In case it's not obvious, you can use this now. You've got your competitive landscape. You can use this now to do all sorts of things with, right? So let's say, and this could be anything. I think somebody mentioned a journey map or a story map, right? For a story map, I think it makes sense to potentially include something like a jobs to be done statement and a problem statement. So we can try to craft, and it might be a good exercise. Can you guys take some of these bits that we've posted here? We've got all of the stuff updated with Stellar Horizons information, and try to craft something that looks like a story map. I'm going to do it on my end here as well. It's not something I've built into the template, so it's going to be a good test to see if we can get something put together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just borrow one of these mats and go from there. In this case, if I think about a story map, it's actually, for me, it's a product management exercise. So I'm going to grab this, I'm going to edit it. In a notepad. If anybody has an output, please feel free to share that output.
I should have done something fake, but I'm working on real problems, so I can't share.
Is it working, Jason?
So far, I'm a little bit behind you. I'm going to have to review some of the steps you've taken along the way, but
I was doing the same thing, Jason, and then I was like, but I want to see this. So I pasted mine in. It was still generating, but I just grabbed the first sort of bits because I was like, wow, holy cow. You know, in how you're structuring the prompts and then seeing the results and then going back and, you know, sort of curating that and asking additional questions is very funnel-like to me. You know, it's like
Right.
you're just gonna funnel it down just like you were trying to get, you know, detailed information out of building queries, right? You're gonna, from what you see, you're gonna go and ask follow-up things and disregard some things and increase the knowledge on other things.
Absolutely. I mean, do you guys see this as an accelerant
For
or?
sure. I mean, even in like say, I've got to go through and edit it and read it and tweak it and all that stuff. And then there may be things that I'm like, that's not right, just because I know. But
Right.
it absolutely gets you going with a huge amount of
First draft machine, right?
oh yes, for sure. Absolutely.
I love
I hate
that.
a blank piece of paper. To your point, they're, you know, we're all trying to solve a lot of the same problems. So it's valid to start from what you can get here and then customize it based on your particular company or organization or need.
Yeah, and Diane, that's exactly how I found it to be helpful. Is kind of an initial brainstorming as in a new project, maybe a newer industry or part of the industry, and just getting my thoughts going and getting me some initial high level research, not producing a
Right.
bowl or something like that. So
Yeah. I know the first time I used it, you know, I was mainly just trying to make sure I wasn't forgetting anything about to go into like both talking to the requesting users and talking to some of the stakeholders and talking to development. So I just, you know, entered, you know, what are the user requirements and development requirements for XYZ? And it spit out a bunch of stuff. A lot of it was stuff I had, but there were a couple of questions that I went, oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. So it just made sure it sort of level checked myself. By the same token, I could take my stuff, paste it in and say, what's missing? Is this clear?
Let's see. So we've got our product management thing. Yeah. By the way, it's worth pointing out that's really, Diane, to your point, what we're mostly going to be using this stuff for. Having these assets here is just sort of ingredients for better prompting, right? So, and I'll give you guys an example of that in a minute, but
Be a
I do
cook,
want,
not a baker.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Problems. So it started to tell us to overcome speed limits, which isn't going to happen clearly. But here we've got a story map. That we're trying to build out, and I actually don't like this necessarily because it doesn't seem particularly comprehensive. I want to try one thing. I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to sort of prime it. What is the story map? Okay.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so you're training it first to sort of get in the right bucket. I think I did that inadvertently with another one I was trying, and it did help the results.
It's a really effective technique. Okay. So I like these quite a bit more. I'm going to convert these into a story map. And it's going to give me some markdown. So now I've got a visual story map I could put into a deck.
That's very cool. I wondered, since you hadn't showed us yet, I wondered how it did that. So yeah, it's markup.
Absolutely. It's we don't have a ton of time left, so I do want to show you a couple of other tips and tricks. And it's worth pointing out that I use a lot of this as design tools. You are so again, the best practice here is all I'm doing is using different prompts that are different kind of chat areas. Each one of these is going to have a different role. I think this is actually my product manager role over here. The best practice is, of course, to label these. You can keep them organized. Story map, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to copy that. I'm going to put it in here. Oh, whoopsies. This takes a little bit of tweaking and a little bit of back and forth. Usually the things that spits out is not the best, but it's still a whole lot easier than
It's a start.
yeah, especially if you have to create a bunch of these. Let's see if what this actually looks like. I'm curious. Oh, I gotta get out of presentation mode. Oh, wait, I didn't. Gotta let it finish. So impatient. So it looks like it just took the story map and kind of put it into some HTML. But the point is, you can get it to generate HTML for you. I use this sometimes to build decks, especially if I've got to create a bunch of. It's very, very useful if you've got to create a bunch of user research material. You've got to create a bunch of stack ranking cards or something like that you're going to print out. That's helpful. Another way you can use this is generate some data deployment. That's years. The US. So don't actually use this to pull data, but let's say you had some data that you were looking to visualize. These are all, I'm sure there's going to be tools that do all of this sooner than later. Natural language generation tools for creating graphs and statistics and that kind of thing. But you can hack around it for now because it does a fairly good job at producing notebooks that will let you visualize certain data. And that's really, again, useful, especially in research. So. So again, of course, you can do this in Excel, and there's a lot of easier, simpler ways to do it, but there is a certain point where it actually becomes very convenient. Whenever you're working with this kind of thing, occasionally you'll get errors. Again, ChatGPT used to be a little bit better at this, but all you got to do is push the errors back into the chatbot. So it's going to ask you to load the data. Please include the data in the data frame without having to load it. So that's why it's erroring me out, but I don't want to go through that process. So we're just going to go ahead and embed it directly into the data frame as an example. But there's a lot, again, there's a lot you could do with this. Okay, so there we go. We've got our data. Again, the neat thing, the reason I quite like using it this way for some of these type of tasks is because I can start to engage it on what I want it to do visually. So this actually becomes a very fast way to edit large amounts of data. So in any case, I know that's a bit of a tangent, but I wanted to make sure you all saw that. I think it's extremely useful. So, okay, coming back to this, now that I've got a bunch of my prompts and a bunch of my sort of ingredients, these are the pieces I can include in any number of prompts that I might need to respond to. So craft an email to executive to give the status of state of market opportunity. And now I've got my context here. I'm not sure what I gave it there, but it's I think it's the ingredients. So instead of having to craft everything from scratch every time you're trying to get something out of a prompt, the point of developing these assets and some of these pre-selected prompts is that you have all of these at your fingertips that you can engage for whatever task you need. Whether it's, okay, simplify this communication or a deck to my development team. So there we go. So it actually speeds up what you can do with it quite a bit, because otherwise having to craft all these from scratch and actually get good content out of it requires more time than it would take for you just to do it half the time. But once you have all these sort of ingredients, it's very, very quick and easy to cook with. So, okay, that's why, by the way, tools like this are really, really helpful. So again, I just discovered this. There's a lot of IDEs out there that are gonna that are coming online and will be coming online over the next couple of months. But tools like this, what they allow you to do is to compile those blocks just the same way. So I can add variations too. So you are
These tools kind of replace your spreadsheet, is that what you're saying?
That's correct. Yeah, I mean the spreadsheet. The reason that's there is for you guys to see how kind of what it's compiling tends to be. Tools will dictate your process, whereas what you want is your process to dictate the tools. Once you understand how they kind of form, this becomes a lot easier because now I can select what I need to do, and I can run it. The disadvantage of these tools is you're not using that chatbot back and forth, and the cost structure is very different because what you're doing is hitting the API. It'll estimate for you how much the completion cost is. So that's a disadvantage, but it's also could be an advantage depending on how much you use this. It's important to note if you're going to use the API for something like this, you're going to just put in your API token. That token is available in if you're in your account, it's going to be available here under API keys. You can generate a new key and use it in any number of these tools. But it's worth noting if you actually want decent results, you've got to change the tokens. Token value here, because if you're maxing it out at 250, that's all you're going to get out. So the max token here is, even though the model can handle more, it's 8100. These are all variables that are worth playing around with because they'll control the creativity and the randomness of your responses. So depending on if you want something very accurate or something fairly random, you could play with these variables, right? It's also worth noting, you see, if I went to 8100, my cost went up to 50 cents. So that call is going to cost me 50 cents, or could cost me as much as 50 cents. So create a backlog for product using following job map. Okay, so then my system prompt. Just gonna clean this up a bit. Kind of show you how easy this is. So it's telling me I can't do it because we got too much text in here. I'm already using 720 tokens. So I'm going to need to go to 7,400 as an output. Oh, sorry. So it's telling me this could cost as much as 50 cents. It's probably going to be way less, but here it's stringing those together, sending it in, and I've got my results coming back. Yeah, this is not that different than what you would do with Excel. The really nice thing here is, okay, I'm going to change this to a UX designer and see if I get a different result. And you probably will. It's also worth noting there are, once you approach it this way, you can go into any one of these models. Here's an open source sort of battle arena for some of these LLMs. And they do not perform as well as like ChatGPT would, but some of them perform very well. So I can look at the outputs of these models and see how they're different from each other. If you were doing something internally, you'd be using some of these models, most likely. So I've been inactive here too long, but some of these models are very powerful. Vicuna, for example, performs up to, I think, 90% of the efficacy. Okay, we're pretty close to noon here. Wanted to make sure, I'm happy to hang out, but I want to be respectful of your all's time. I'll be hanging out, answer any questions, any discussions you all want, but I hope you all found this valuable. We talked a little bit about how these models work, how to structure prompts. We talked about role prompting. We talked about context prompting. We talked about zero shot, one shot, and let's see. We built a bunch of assets too. So we walked through the process of picking an LLM, picking a focus area, building agents, building some artifacts that you can use, and doing things like building out a product backlog. We didn't get to some of this other stuff, but I think you guys get the idea here. Any artifacts you need to create, launch plans, marketing collateral, you can use this as a starting point and a way to engage. We also didn't spend a lot of time on taking existing artifacts and testing them for understanding, but that's a really powerful way to engage in some of these models. We did talk about some of these IDEs. I'll share these resources with y'all, and obviously feel free to reach out. But please do connect with me if you guys have any questions. My website's Wired Cognition too, so you feel free to sign up. And when I do articles or create some additional assets, I'm happy to share with the folks that I am connected to or have that contact information with. But again, thank you guys very much for your time, and I appreciate the opportunity to share some of this stuff with you. I hope it helped.
Yeah, it was awesome.
It
Thank you.
was.
Thank you
Truly
so much.
very helpful.
We have
Misha,
a question after people exit.
yeah. Misha, can you share with us the Chat GPT threads that you were using for this workshop? Because I think we need to probably go back and look at some of it. It went really fast.
Oh yeah, I'm so sorry that I sped through those. I'd be
No,
happy
it's
to
good. It was great.
listen to
It
the other
just
ones.
we're
So
just kind
we
of like trying to figure it out.
For sure.
We keep a notes document for these, and we'll have that in the archive, Misha. We can either export and paste it in the notes document, or we could just paste a link to the state of the threads that you used, and we'll include those in the session materials.
Perfect. I'll share a thread for an educational software company that I think is a little bit easier to connect with than interstellar travel that I did last night. So
That'd be great. Thanks, Misha. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Fantastic, Misha. Thank you very much. And for those of you in Atlanta, Misha will be with us at the AI Forum for AI for Product Managers Forum on July 27th at the Brass Tap. If you can join us for that, that'd be great. You can head over to productcoffee.com/forum to sign up for that.
Sounds good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have
Misha, I had
a
a quick
great.
question.
yeah, for sure.
On the spreadsheet. If you don't mind bringing that back up again.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we talked about the prompt canvas and the roles. If you go to the prompt worksheet again, I'm trying to scoop all these together again. Okay. All right, so this the prompt worksheet kind of walks you through the steps of the process, right? This is kind of your process flow, so to speak.
Yeah, and again, this should fit whatever your model is. Like,
Yeah.
let's say you don't need a bunch of these. This is I kind of use this when I talk about it as like if I was talking to or working with somebody that is like late maturity, right? It would be these artifacts that we would be focusing into, right? But again, this is just off of as pragmatic marketing as a launch point, but it could be however you guys do product management, right?
Awesome.
So that framework inventory, that's coming from some best practices out of industry, right?
Yeah, these are all off of pragmatic marketing because I feel like it's very, very comprehensive, right? There are definitely things that are missing here. But and then there are things that I added because they're not necessarily there, like user personas and buyer personas and that kind of thing. At least not explicitly, but they're important artifacts. So, or like jobs to be done. But this should be whatever you use, right? So this is part of the kind of that curation process. You got to think of yourself as almost like you're program managing a product organization, and how do you want that product organization to interact?
Oh, perfect. And what's the life cycles tab?
Oh, that's just a mapping between like the 4 life cycles, so that y'all know what the deal is with this.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't do anything. Yeah, it's just there for fun.
Okay, and then canvas and the roles. Okay, cool. Thank you. I want to make sure I understood all those tabs.
For sure.
Yeah, very, very cool stuff.
Excellent.
Just a quick question. I love this. Yeah, I think for my organization, I'm guessing that the best fit way to do this is kind of bring the product team together and like talk about, like, hey, let's start adopting tools. Here's an example of a framework. And then start really tailoring it to what our product management processes,
Yeah.
our roles.
Exactly. And it's also fun because I think most product organizations aspire to have these artifacts ready to go, but they really don't, because things shift so quickly, right? So for me, it's almost been a forcing mechanism to make sure that, like, we have these things in place. And ChatGPT or not, AI or not, like, it makes you a very much stronger product organization if you have these things defined, right? Obviously, we do roadmaps and we do user stories, but oftentimes you don't have formal launch plans or marketing plans, or you don't have the time or the resources. So, but they're all critical to making sure that product is successful. We just tend to prioritize things that are more immediate.
Yeah, that's a good point you bring up. I'm trying to think of like a good entry point for this. It's almost like we've kind of updated our strategy. Now let's start executing this strategy, or even before that, maybe is we've done all this research to inform the strategy.
Yeah.
Now let's take that information and start pumping it into a framework like this, leveraging the AI tools to then, all right, here's the pieces of our strategy. Now let's start building out roadmap, the story maps that we're going to have on our roadmap, and eventually all the other pieces, the user stories, get ready for the engineering team.
That's right. Yeah.
Versus like a one-off feature, maybe.
Yeah, systematizing this across the team is very powerful. And then this could be iterative too. So you start with, your view of those artifacts and cycle it through a product team and see how they change, and they will change. And just from those differences, the insights you get are really valuable. How do people see differences in the competitive landscape? It's a whole lot easier to share that and say, okay, now make edits, and I'm going to bring that all together, and you can choose ChatGPT to do it and bring it all together and highlight where there's friction points.
You can see the first one being super slow because you're trying to fact check the results you're getting from one of the models against, like, I'm gonna do it manually in real life here. Make sure it's accurate.
Yeah, but please don't trust. I mean, don't trust what it's outputting. Use it as a starting point, please.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah. First draft machine.
Yeah. Exactly.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I have a question.
Shoot.
First of all, a comment. I actually found a great article on how to set up your own private LLM, and I shared it via the chat with everyone. I'll share it with you because I wanted to find out if this might be a great reference, because I think that most of us will be thinking that once we have a way to put together this way of testing concepts, how do we actually start now using it for some real scenarios that we're looking at in a way that is private. So I think that most of us are probably at some point going to have to request, that we set up a private LLM just for doing concept, which is what I see you did here at the beginning. The other thing is that for product discovery, I think this is a great framework. And if I'm looking at this, there's phases that once you get into iterating and having a more elaborate concept, because you have involved teams, now you're going to have to go and test that concept against real prospects. And so at that point, even before you move into design and development, you want to start recruiting people, real life people that are outside the building. This may be customers or prospects, and start really validating whether or not, number one, is this the right problem from their point of view to be solving? And then number two, is this the right solution space that you came up with very quickly, possible solution space? Is this the right, and get validation and bring that feedback to iterate on this, maybe do some A/B testing before you move on to design and development. I think that by doing that, in the concept, you can actually start testing with just sketches, pictures, and just get feedback from real people before moving into the actual design and development phase. I think that this is all about having a system by which you're doing configuration management, so to speak, on prototypes, which is sketches, stories, and testing those stories in front of real prospects before you move them into design and development. Have you considered doing that? Because I think this will add value and probably even rows to this framework.
Yeah.
So you're tracking all of this as you're doing the actual customer discovery, customer validation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't not do validation, right? You can't use this as your source. You still have to have the strategy conversations. I use these LLMs a lot for creating artifacts for customer validation. Stuff that like UX research might be doing. This is a really good way to say, okay, let's say we're going to do a cart sorting exercise or we're going to do a survey. We're going to go out and survey. Help me create some surveys. Help me test these surveys out. So it's really great at producing artifacts to do that. Again, it's much better to do it thoughtfully. It's just I'd rather have something like this produce those artifacts and actually go out and do UXR than not do it at all and pretend that I understand the market.
Yes. And ultimately you want the UX designers to actually, whatever they come up with before it's actually implemented, come up with something that you can test against real prospects. And I think all of that can even feed even more detail and allow you to reprioritize based on feedback.
Yep, absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It's a great insights.
Thank you.
Misha, I had a quick question. Just, I love these examples in the product space, but for someone such as yourself, who's really knows a lot about these things in large language modules, I'm just curious, how do you use this in a non-professional sense? Like, how do you use this? How do you use this in your personal life? If you don't mind sharing, like, are there any just really unique things that you've found that you can do with it that you wouldn't have thought? Or
I use it for communication a lot.
okay.
So like I've got a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll test my my parenting methodology before trying it out on them.
Really interesting.
It's really good at translating between people too. So, sometimes if I disagree with somebody, I might before getting frustrated, I might put their perspective and my perspective into a chat and help translate into something that's not translate those perspectives, if that makes sense.
I haven't even thought of that. That's really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I love it though. I use it I use them in my personal life pragmatically for a lot of stuff. It's really good at travel planning too. Travel planning is really good. I'll take the kids to like the botanical gardens, and I'll have it create a scavenger hunt.
Really?
So, there's, yeah.
Because I definitely, I see the professional application, but I think part of it too, and this is something I need to do, is just playing with it in a sense, like just exploring with it to see what are these things. Because I wouldn't even thought about that, kind of having it help with communication or I haven't even thought about that. So I appreciate that. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Toasts, by the way, speeches, the dreaded wedding speech. Yeah.
It's good to know. Know. I love this.
Let's see who's on here. LinkedIn recommendations. I've done a few kind of where I fed in, here's what I want to say, make it nice, and then a few edits and I'm good. I have a prompt container that I've set up. I guess that's the right word for it. Kind of I've set up a ChatGPT template that has a bunch of writing samples of things that I have personally written, and I'll give it some bullet points and say, write something in my style. in my personal style, and it does a good job of using the kind of wording and inflection and energy that I would use in my own original content as well.
Indeed.
This was awesome, Misha. Thank you so much. Great session, fantastic workshop.
Thank you.
And you've got a invite to the Slack channel in your mailbox as well. Hope to see you in there.
Well, appreciate it, guys. Great to meet everybody.
Take care. Bye, everybody.